But more locally in Australia, last night, the who's who of the business community gathered for the BCA annual dinner, where the Prime Minister claimed that he is pro-business and pro-worker. But, Michael, he tiptoed around the union-backed IR laws. This is the main point of contention. He did admit there were cracks in the relationship with the business sector. Let's have a quick look at that.
I am optimistic that government and business can do this together. We have different responsibilities that demand different approaches. So it is inevitable we will have occasional differences of opinion.
Michael, do you think Albanese is facing, to some extent, a revolt from the business community?
Well, of course he is. The question is whether the business community can act on that and change votes. I mean, the trade union movement for decades have given money to and supported the Labor Party in elections. The BCA and, state-based affiliates and hangers-on tend to be neutral during election campaigns, which doesn't do their cause any good because the government then doesn't, the Labor government never fear them. So they've got to get active like the mining companies did over the mining tax. I mean, if you don't fight, you lose. The Business Council doesn't fight, so it keeps losing. So it has these wonderful dinners and cocktail parties where they, have these meetings. But I'm sorry, Labor politicians take no notice of the Business Council of Australia, and increasingly so, the Liberal Party politicians don't take much notice of them. The last public campaign the business community ran with full force was to give millions of dollars to The Voice.
Good point.
That was a debacle and a disaster and makes them just insipid. So if they get back to fighting for their members, people will start taking them seriously, and the incoming Liberal government, if that's to be the case, will take them seriously.
And they have shown a bit of fight over the past fortnight, and we hear that behind the scenes the Prime Minister hasn't been happy about this. He's communicated some of that privately, as I understand it, to senior leadership in the BCA. But Richo, it's not just the business community who's complaining here. Your old mate, Bill Kelty, has come out at a private luncheon to say that, well, the government's not doing enough to lift productivity. What did you make of his remarks?
Well, I think when Kelty speaks, you're a mug if you don't listen. That's the main point here. Kelty is wise beyond belief and has a stellar record. So if I were the government and I heard Kelty taking a stance like that, I'd be listening and I'd be acting upon it.
Would you agree with what he said, that there needs to be tax reform? He said personal income tax brackets, when you add in GST, he's saying it's over 50%, it's too high. You put in bracket creep on top of that, and even with the tax cuts, people are paying more tax than they were 2 years ago. This is what he's saying. There needs to be tax reform.
Yeah, well, there does. Otherwise, you do what we're doing now. You chase your tail. You just go around in a circle, and that's all we're doing. So something's got to be done to break that. And if we don't break it, then I think all we're doing is condemning ourselves to committing the same sins.
I mean, the problem is, Michael Kroger, that government spending just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. The NDIS, one of the biggest cost blowouts. So no government is going to want to rein in personal income tax. But, I mean, it's unsustainable, isn't it?
Absolutely unsustainable. I mean, as I said, the problem with Chalmers is he's too weak. He's spending $130 billion more between 2023 and 2026, according to the budget papers. $130 billion more than he's getting. And so when you've got a weak treasurer who cannot resist the demands upon him, right? He always wants to spend money. And look, you can say, there's no cause that isn't a good cause for government. Infrastructure, welfare, health, education. But you've got to draw the line somewhere. And when you've got a weak treasurer who doesn't have an economics background like Jim Chalmers, who's floundering, it's very bad for the government. And, to be a successful government, state or federal, you've got to have a strong treasurer who can resist the overtures of your own supporters. Chalmers can't do that. Albanese can't do it. They're captives of the sort of the left-wing, activists, and that's why the Australian economy is in a mess. And it's not going to get any better under Chalmers, because, as most people think, he's spending far too much money, and that's why inflation is still just under 4%.